But y'all, this has brought me back to my fangirl era of existing. Like my teen years, the fangirl in me was going wild.
Which, yes, this world is bleak, but I don't know. I'd just be cracking jokes in the bleakest of times. Maybe it's inappropriate. I don't know.
Suzanne, what's going on, girl? I think we need to have a conversation because what the fuck?
But do I love Haymitch because of Woody Harrelson's depiction of Haymitch? Or do I love Haymitch because I love Haymitch? I don't know.
Are you going to the tree?
Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Steph and today is so exciting because we are finally starting the Hunger Games. And this is in anticipation for Sunrise on the Reaping, which is Haymitch's story. Haymitch is a pretty pivotal character in this series. I'm so excited to see what more we have in store with his prequel story. So to prepare myself, I am rereading the Hunger Games. I'm very excited because I have reread The Hunger Games 3 times, Catching Fire twice, and I have never reread Mockingjay because teenage me did not like Mockingjay, but teenage me was also smooth-brained. My frontal lobe had not developed. So I'm very excited to see what adult me thinks of this. Is she any less smooth-brained? I don't think so. Hello friends! So I have finally started The Hunger Games. The Hungy Games. I have thoughts. I've actually written some down. So the beginning of this book opens on Reaping Day, which, fun fact, Reaping Day is always on July 4th. We do also find out in this beginning portion that Panem is a ravaged North America. So it is a climate ravaged North America years and years in the future. And District 12 is actually located in the Appalachian Mountains. So I think that's very interesting and like important to note because in my brain reading this the first time that I ever read it, and I guess subsequently, I never picked up on the fact that this is North America. We also are learning about the districts. So we know that Katniss is from District 12 and District 12 is the, I don't know if you would call it the lowest district or it's just like the furthest district from the capital. That I haven't worked out yet. But every single district produces something for the capital. And District 12 is a coal mining community. And Katniss even describes District 12, which is also called the Seam, that's the nickname for District 12, as having a layer of coal dust settled on everything and every crack and crevice that you could just never get rid of. I actually really love that description. It made it very easy to imagine what they're experiencing and like how nothing is ever clean. One of the other things that like really stuck out to me when she's describing District 12 and kind of talking about the way the districts work and the capital works, District 12 and what I would imagine all of the other districts are penned in. They are penned in by this electric fence. It's supposed to have electricity 24/7, but it doesn't. And so the very beginning when we meet Katniss, she is actually going through a hole in the fence to go hunting. And we very quickly learn that Katniss's father died in a coal mining accident that left her mother very depressed and unable to respond to things, unable to actually care for her 2 children, and Katniss had to step up and be the mom. And part of that meant bringing food home, so she started to learn how to hunt. Her father did teach her how to hunt, but she like gets better and better at it as time goes on, and by the time we meet her, she's like an expert hunter and her weapon is the bow and arrow. I think this moment of talking about Katniss's parents and Katniss having to step up and be a mother figure and like the head of the household is really important as well, because we also learn that there's this thing called the tessary, and putting your name into the tessary means that you get like 1 bag of grain, 1 bag of other stuff. It's like not enough to feed you for the year. So it's often that these families are putting their names in 3 or 4 times in a year, which means that the likelihood that their children will get called for the reaping is much higher. This beginning portion is very informative, and I think it gives you a real good picture of what's happening in these districts. And while we don't really get insight into the other districts at this moment, you can only imagine that all of the districts are suffering in this way. So when Katniss goes hunting, we do meet Gale, and Gale is a character I have a lot of mixed feelings about, and it's not necessarily because of the romantic element that gets like pushed onto Katniss with Gale. It's more of things that happened in Mockingjay, which I know we will talk about. But I have a lot of mixed feelings about Gale, and I also have a lot of mixed feelings about the romance in this series. I know it was something in the past when I was first reading this series that I really hated. I hated the romantic element of it. And so I'm really curious how I will feel, because already when we meet Gale in the woods, Katniss immediately says like there is no romance between them. They have more of like a brother-sisterly bond, and they met simply because both of them lost their fathers in this mining accident. I mean, they met because District 12 is tiny, but they bonded because they both had to step up and be the head of their family and learn how to hunt so that they didn't have to put their selves or their brothers and sisters into the tesserae. And so we see immediately that they just have like a brother-sister relationship. They're kind of joking around, which is cool because I have watched the movie, and the movie doesn't have a lot of humor in it. It's pretty bleak, which yes, this world is bleak, but I don't know, I've just be cracking jokes in the bleakest of times. Maybe it's inappropriate, I don't know. I will say though, we start learning things very quickly. We jump into everything immediately. Katniss is ready to tell you everything, right? And then the reaping starts like by mid chapter 1. Like, this is all happening in chapter 1, okay? And then I think by mid chapter 1, if not the beginning of chapter 2, maybe, the reaping begins. And, you know, we see Effie Trinket, which she's such a complicated character to me, but also I just don't remember her getting a lot of backstory or fleshing out overall. So I'm curious if I just missed it, like I forgot about it. But she's an interesting character to me in general. Like, obviously we're seeing her for the first time calling the names of these tributes, but also we know that she spends a lot of time with Katniss and Peeta throughout the first 2 books. And there's this interesting dichotomy with her as a character where there are moments where obviously she's a product of the Capitol and she is playing into these games and these people's suffering and oppression. But then at the same time, she seems to have like this level of empathy, and the closer she gets to Peeta and Katniss, the more it seems, you would hope, that she's beginning to see how messed up all of this is. But I don't know that as a character we ever really get to see her get there. So I'm interested to see if like I'm just not remembering that, but I really don't think that she ever gets there like on page. Although one thing about Suzanne Collins, and one thing about the movies as well, is that there's such subtlety in everyone's movements, the way they look at each other, the pauses, the silences, you know what I mean? I don't know, everything Suzanne does, it feels very intentional. So then we have the big moment where, you know, Prim Everdeen, Katniss's little sister, in theory has the lowest chance of getting called, but her name ends up getting called, and Katniss immediately freaks out and volunteers as tribute in Prim's place. This is an extremely pivotal moment. It's not rare that somebody volunteers as tribute, but I think the passion and the way that Katniss volunteers and kind of freaks out in this moment moved a lot of people. And I think that these are the beginning rumblings, right? This is the beginning moment of a revolution starting, but I don't really think that this is the moment. And then right after Katniss's sister gets called and she volunteers, Peeta gets called. And Peeta is the other person in this love triangle with Gale, but he's also a very pivotal and important character within this book. In some ways you can call him the secondary character, but I feel like he's not in the books enough for that to be true. But he is a very main character, and he is very important to Katniss's development and like a lot of the choices that she makes throughout this series. But it's really sad actually when Peeta gets called, because he does have 2 brothers. And while the assumption is that one of them is too old to volunteer, the other assumption is that the other one is of age to volunteer and just didn't. But I don't think that that's uncommon. But actually, the further you get to know Peeta and his family, it seems like his father is the only like softie in that family. The mom is very abusive. And we also know that Peeta pretty much saved Katniss's life at one point. So Katniss reflects on before she started hunting, like right after her dad died, and her not being able to actually get them food on the table, and her mom just like not being helpful in any capacity because of her grief and her depression. And so Katniss was starving. She was like on the brink of death. She was kind of accepting the fact that she was going to die. And Peeta sees her in the streets and throws her a burnt piece of bread. And Katniss to this day is like, I think that he purposefully burnt this bread so that he could give it to me. And she thinks about it over and over and over again. And Katniss is one of those characters that like really ruminates on things and people's actions and like why or why not they did something for her. And she feels so deeply, and being in her head I think is very important for the story. I don't always love first person, but I think it's really, really important in this story in particular. I also wonder if the moment of Peeta's brothers not volunteering for him is a way of showing like complacency within the districts in the capital. Like, this is just the norm, this is what happens. While we may hate it and while we may want to rage against the capital, like there's nothing we can do. There's a sense of helplessness, you know what I mean? Because I do feel like there is this sense of helplessness for so many people. And speaking of helplessness, the goodbyes scene, like they have I think 20 minutes to say goodbye to everyone that they love. What the fuck? It was so sad. And then like Peeta's dad goes in there and tells her like, I'll take care of them, I'll make sure they don't starve. And Katniss is also like yelling at her mom like, hey girl, you need to take care of Prim. Like, I can't do it now, you need to step up and be a mom. But also there's a sense of people believing that Katniss has like a chance of winning. And I think that that is really cool, that there are characters who actually believe she had a chance from winning from like the moment she volunteered. Which goes to show that while Katniss feels small and invisible a lot of the times, people are paying attention to her. Also, 12 is small. I think all the districts are fairly small. Also, another, speaking of helplessness, we meet Haymitch. And he is one of the only victors in 12, so he is a mentor to Katniss and Peeta. Haymitch, wow, what a guy. It's funny because like I know I love Haymitch, but do I love Haymitch because of Woody Harrelson's depiction of Haymitch, or do I love Haymitch because I love Haymitch? I don't know. At this point, you know that he's a drunk. He feels so detached, but it's very obvious that he is struggling. And I'm just curious like what I don't remember about his story throughout the rest of this series, because I really don't remember him being like the biggest and most pivotal part of this story. I think a lot of characters to me feel bigger than they actually are in the books, and that we actually don't get a lot of time with them. So yeah, I left off basically at the part where they're starting to get ready to show the tributes and like have to wear all of these outfits and sell themselves to the audience. So that is where I've left off. I don't know if I'll be able to read anymore today, but I just wanted to update some of my thoughts and feelings so far because I'm like in it. I forgot how much I love this book. I forgot how much I love the writing. I feel like I'm gonna get addicted. It's gonna be my new obsession. Also, the first movie, impeccable. I loved the changes that they made. Sometimes I hate changes that they make in book adaptations. I think the 4 movies that they made for the trilogy, all of the changes that they made sense to me, and I actually really liked them. On that note, I'm gonna go.
Hello friends, excuse all of this. I have been in bed most of the day with a really bad migraine. I'm feeling like slightly better right now. I drank a lot of water. I've taken some medication, but mainly I've been laying in bed and listening to The Hunger Games. I've actually never listened to The Hunger Games. I did want to read these physically, but like physical reading just isn't happening for me right now. I've been getting a lot of headaches and stuff, but I forgot I like annotated these when I was in college. I read these for an English lit class where we were focusing on YA, and the teacher focused a lot on dystopian novels. So we read The Hunger Games, we read Divergent, and we read this other book that if I remember it, I'm gonna put it here because I remember enjoying it, but I never ever moved on with the series. So yeah, I've had the most opportunity today because I've been laying in bed with my eyes closed to read this, and I have been following along with my ebook. Despite listening to it, I have been following along with my ebook, highlighting things. And there is so much that I simultaneously remember / don't remember, or it's like coming back to me as I'm reading it. The thing that continues to happen to me is I get really emotional and overwhelmed and teary-eyed at the idea of a 17-year-old having the world placed on her shoulders and not even knowing that that's what's happening to her. And now arguably the weight of the world was on her shoulders when it came to having to take care of her family and feed herself. But like now she is truly the face of a revolution and has no idea it's happening. And you do see hints of this. There's a moment when she finally meets Cinna. She's describing him and she's describing how he's so different than a lot of the capital people that she's met. The only affectation that he has on his body is some gold eyeliner. And they meet and they have like a very nice exchange, and she essentially asks him, oh, you're new because you got placed with 12, right? And he says, no, I asked for District 12. And she's very surprised. She doesn't really have much to say to that. And obviously it's such a small thing, right? And it could be something that's thrown away. But the fact that we kind of already know, if you've read the series, that Cinna is a part of the revolution, but also he is a huge part in creating this caricature for Katniss being the Mockingjay, being the girl on fire, being the face of this revolution. And these little things continue to add up, right? So we finally get to the point when Caesar Flickerman gets introduced, which he's one of my favorite characters, especially in the movie. Stanley Tucci is so good at his character. But it gets further solidified in that moment when Peeta is kind of playing the long game, right? He's trying to make her desirable because there's this whole thing about her personality being very abrasive. She's not very likable, and there's only small moments with certain people where she's very likable. She's very soft with them, but otherwise she's very hardened to the world, obviously, because of how the capital is set up and how everything kind of exists in her world. And so Peeta and Haymitch, going along with this, believe that making her desirable through Peeta will keep her alive. And like, obviously Katniss is taking this as, oh, they're trying to belittle me. They're trying to make me look weak. And it's really interesting how that's being set up, because I've always been curious about how much of a long game Haymitch has been playing. Like, how involved was he the entirety of the time of making Katniss the face of this revolution? Was it in these beginning moments? Or was it just because they thought that she had a chance of winning? That's one of the things that I don't really remember from Catching Fire or Mockingjay. Like, if we actually talk about those things, if we actually get deep into, was Haymitch as involved as it seems from the very beginning? Was Cinna as involved as it seems from the very beginning? Was she the face of the revolution from this moment? Because that's what it feels like, right? Just based on what I know and how these stories go, that's what it feels like. But I could just be reading into it. But it just makes me curious, like, do we get the answers of how much Haymitch knew about District 13? How much did he know about what Plutarch was planning, etc., etc.? And these are things that obviously come in Catching Fire and more so in Mockingjay. So we can circle back to this, but these are the questions that are like swirling around in my mind when I'm reading this, because it feels like these small moments mean a lot, but I don't know if I'm just reading into it because of what I know about the story. The other thing that happens that is simultaneously so heartbreaking but so sweet is the moment that they're in the training arena. So they're obviously training, kind of trying to show off to the other tributes about like their strengths and stuff like that. And Peeta says, oh, I think we have a shadow. And of course it's Prue. Prue is from District 11, and this is how she's described in the book. It says, I throw my spear, which I'm not too bad at actually if I don't have to throw too far, and see the little girl from District 11 standing back a bit watching us. She's the 12-year-old, the one who reminded me so of Prim in stature. Up close she looks about 10. She has bright dark eyes and satiny brown skin and stands tilted up on her toes with her arms slightly extended to her side, as if ready to take wing at the slightest sound. It's impossible not to think of a bird. I pick up another spear while Peeta throws. I think her name's Rue, he says softly. I bite my lip. Rue is a small yellow flower that grows in the meadow. Rue, Primrose, neither of them could tip the scale at 70 pounds soaking wet. What can we do about it? I ask him more harshly than I intended. Nothing to do, he says back. Just making conversation. Now that I know she's there, it's hard to ignore the child. She slips up and joins us at different stations. Like me, she's clever with plants, climbs swiftly, and has a good aim. She can hit the target every time with a slingshot. Like, I can't. I really love and hate that moment because it obviously is showcasing that this game is barbaric in so many ways. Like, we've known that from the description of the game, right? But then when you see the fact that there's this 12-year-old child who looks younger, is tiny, maybe 70 pounds soaking wet, reminds Katniss of her little sister who she has been a mother to for so long, like, it really starts to solidify how disgusting these games are. And while Katniss obviously has always known that, that's something that she very readily talks about in the beginning of the book. I think the fact that she obviously volunteered herself in place of her little sister so that her little sister didn't have to experience what Rue is experiencing, than to come into this game and see Rue and realize, like, it doesn't matter. The Capitol fucking sucks. Like, it doesn't matter what I do and how many people I stand in place of. This will keep happening. And that's what also is just so amazing about Suzanne Collins and her writing in general, is that I feel like everything means something, and maybe that's why I'm reading so much into these little moments with like Cinna and Haymitch and like why Peeta is doing what he's doing. I feel like everything the characters notice, everything that they're questioning, everything that you're questioning as a reader is there for a purpose. And this has actually been very solidified because I've been watching this video by Dove, who talks about the Mormon implications of the Hunger Games and like Snow in general in the Capitol, and that the Capitol must be located in Salt Lake City. I'm gonna link it down below if you want to watch it. I think that the deep dive was very good, and there's so much evidence to the fact that Dove is correct in their theory. And I actually started watching that before I got deeper into my reread. So I've been noticing the things that they're pointing out, and it's really cool to have that context, because I've always heard different theories about it being in like Colorado and Wyoming, and the Salt Lake City one actually makes the most sense to me geographically, especially this time really paying attention to the geography. Yeah, that deep dive really has me questioning so much, because even Dove mentions that like in an interview, Suzanne Collins talked about how everything in her books is intentional. I feel like that's why I'm just reading into everything. So at this point in the book where I just left off, we're at the point where Peeta and Katniss have their interview with Caesar Flickerman, and Peeta essentially says like he's in love with Katniss, he's had a crush on her forever, so many guys find her desirable, and she takes it as this, you're trying to belittle me, you're trying to make me look weak. And Haymitch and Peeta are like, no, we're trying to make you look desirable. Which arguably I feel like Katniss has the right to be mad about these games that they're playing and not like letting her in on, but they're trying to get genuine reactions out of her, I guess. So I don't know, I feel very conflicted about the way that Katniss is used throughout this book. So yeah, we know that Peeta wanted to be trained separately. We know that he admitted that he's in love with Katniss. Obviously, I think the two go hand in hand. He wanted to like not have Katniss around when he came up with this plan with Haymitch, and he kind of knew that Haymitch would go along with it. So then that leads to this conversation, which is the last conversation that I just read, and it's the conversation where Peeta is basically telling Katniss like, I want to know how to keep my identity through these Hunger Games, because the inevitability of me killing somebody is high, but how do I keep my identity? How do I keep my sense of self through this, even though I know I'm gonna die? So he's resigned himself to the fact that he's dying, but he's also having this like moral dilemma. How does one keep their integrity intact in a game like this when the point is that you have to kill other people and your survival instincts are obviously going to kick in? And so it's interesting how Katniss sort of responds to that, because she gets really angry about it. I thought that was really interesting because Katniss struggles so much with feeling inferior to people, and I think that's a product of how she was raised and like the capital and the districts in general. So she says, I bite my lip feeling inferior. While I've been ruminating on the availability of trees, Peeta has been struggling with how to maintain his identity, his purity of self. Do you mean you won't kill anyone? I ask. No, when the time comes, I'm sure I'll kill just like everybody else. I can't go down without a fight. Only I keep wishing I could think of a way to show the Capitol they don't own me, that I'm more than just a piece in their games, says Peeta. But you're not, I say. None of us are. That's how the games work. Okay, but within that framework, there's still you, there's still me, he insists. Don't you see? A little. Only no offense, but who cares, Peeta? I say. I do. I mean, what else am I allowed to care about at this point? He asks angrily. He's locked those blue eyes on mine, now demanding an answer. I take a step back, care about what Haymitch said about staying alive? Peeta smiles at me, sad and mocking. Okay, thanks for the tip, sweetheart. It's like a slap in the face, his use of Haymitch's patronizing endearment. Look, if you want to spend the last hours of your life planning some noble death in the arena, that's your choice. I want to spend mine in District 12. Wouldn't surprise me if you do, said Peeta. Give my mother my best when you make it back, will you? Count on it, I say. Then I turn to leave the roof. Man, that conversation hurts. Like, I'm not necessarily like Team Peeta, Team Gale, whatever. I don't care about any of that. But I do think their dynamic is so interesting, and it's also like no one is ever going to understand each other the way that they're going to understand each other because of these games, right? And this whole situation that they're going through. I don't know, I'm just really loving this reread, but it's very emotional for me. Anyway, I'm sure that I will get through quite a bit more today. We're about to enter into the arena, so I feel like I'm going to be locked in. So I will try to update you a little bit later today with some of my thoughts and feelings about where we're at in the book. But y'all, this has brought me back to my fangirl era of existing. Like, my teen years, the fangirl in me was going wild. She was going wild, okay? There were so many books that I was like obsessed with, so many characters I was obsessed with. I've talked about this before. I was a Twilight girly, and I used to make my own merch on Zazzle.com, okay? My fangirl era, I think, is coming back though. And it's really coming back with Hunger Games. Hello, it's been like maybe 20 minutes since I last updated you, and I've gotten to the part where Katniss is about to enter into the arena, and there was a moment between her and Cinna that's just like so heart-wrenching, because rightfully so, she doesn't trust anyone in the Capitol. She doesn't trust any of these people that are prepping her to go to her death, basically. And I think in some ways she doesn't fully like believe in herself. She doesn't fully believe that she's going to win or has a chance. So she has this moment with Cinna that's like heart-wrenching, because it's a moment where she realizes that somebody does truly believe in her and she actually accepts it. Because the thing is like, Peeta believes in her. Peeta genuinely believes that she has a chance at winning, but she doesn't really accept that from him, right? But with Cinna, it's like different, because she's immediately been drawn to him. She immediately has kind of trusted him. And so in this moment, still clenching one of Cinna's hands, I walk over and stand on the circular metal plate. Remember what Haymitch said? Run, find water, the rest will follow, he says, and I nod. And remember this, I'm not allowed to bet, but if I could, my money would be on you. Truly? I whisper. Truly. Truly, says Cinna. He leans down and kisses me on the forehead. Good luck, girl on fire. And then a glass cylinder is lowering around me, breaking our handhold, cutting him off from me. He taps his fingers under his chin, head high. I'm not even deep into this. Ladies and gentlemen, let the 74th Hunger Games begin. Fucking Snow's old ass. He's like, what, like 90 at this point? And you've got beef? You've got beef with a 17-year-old? But anyway, I'm actually at the part where they're in their second day in the arena, and she finds out that Peeta is partnering with the careers, which is like District 1 and 2, and they're the ones that are most likely to win. They typically win the Hunger Games because they've spent their life training for the Hunger Games. That's why they're the careers. So yeah, she finds out basically that he has partnered with them and that they're actually looking for her so that they can kill her, because she had such a high score and she is quite a threat to them. Oh, I don't think I ever talked about that either. One of my favorite scenes in the book, like very beginning of the book, one of my favorite scenes is when they, you know, I told you they're in the training arena. That's where they meet Rue. But there's this private training session that they have to do, where a lot of the people from the district that would give money and prizes and stuff like that get to see what these tributes actually can do, what kind of special abilities that they have. Because a lot of times they get told to hold back their special abilities when they're training as a group, so that nobody knows every single thing you have up your sleeve. So this private training is to show everything that you have, to give it your all, so that you have a better chance of getting money and presents from these people. And she's the second to last to be going. There's 24 tributes, so she's 23 in line. She's talking about how all of the Capitol people are basically drunk at this point. They're more interested in this pig roast that had just come out, and there's only a few people paying attention to her. So she does like some amazing work with her bow and arrow and a knife, and no one's really paying attention. So she gets irritated. So she literally shoots her arrow into the game makers to hit the apple out of the pig's mouth. And she literally just bows and is like, thanks for your consideration, and walks away. And she ends up getting a score of 11. I don't know what the highest score is. I was assuming that it's 12 because it's like the 12 districts. But yeah, she gets a score of 11, which is very high, and she wasn't expecting it. The fact that she's been getting a lot of attention based on the interviews and the way that Peeta made her a little more desirable, plus her score. Yeah, she's a target now in the arena, and Peeta has partnered with the careers, and he is going after her. And Katniss is pissed. She is pissed. So anyway, that's where I'm at in the book. But yeah, I needed to share that. Even though I said I wasn't going to update you on every little freaking thing that crosses my mind, here I am. My head still hurts, but I was able to get through the workday. And it's pie day, so we're getting pizza. We're getting pizza, everybody. Okay, I thought that I was going to update you a little bit more, especially after Rue's death in the book, but I just couldn't because, well, I was a mess, but also I started to kind of start feeling shitty again. So I ended up finishing the book and starting Catching Fire because these books are so readable. They're so readable. And now I'm in the mood for like anything dystopian, post-apocalyptic, but there's so many of those books that I just don't really want to reread because I don't think that they will hold up the way that The Hunger Games is. But I digress. I finished The Hunger Games and I have some thoughts about the ending. It's nothing like pivotal, it's nothing huge, but I do have a few thoughts, a few feelings. So Rue's death. Rue's death is... I feel like this whole book is leading to this moment, right? Because I questioned a little bit in my second update about like, what was the spark of this revolution? How long had Haymitch and others been involved in this revolution and like realizing that Katniss could be the face of the revolution, right? Was it the moment that she stuck up for her sister, or was it solidified when Rue's death happened? And my theory is that it was solidified when Rue's death happened, and that is simply because that was a moment that obviously everybody could witness, that time and time again this young woman stands up for the little guy, right? But also I think what solidifies this is the fact that you can see for the first time maybe that Katniss really is seeing what's going on in the Capitol. Like, she's always seen it, but this very much solidifies it, and I think it especially sets it off because she is so reminded of her little sister, who she thought she was protecting by standing up for her, volunteering for her, but at the same time she can't like volunteer as tribute for all of the 12-year-olds that remind her of her sister. So Rue's death is like just heartbreaking in and of itself. You felt like maybe she had a chance because she was so cunning, and then you realize that that's just like not what the games are. So her death is just like really impactful for a multitude of reasons. But again, it felt like the book was leading up to this moment because she finally understands what Peeta was talking about. When she thought that he was patronizing her and belittling her and making her feel stupid, in reality, she finally understands exactly what he's meaning. And I don't think she would have ever gotten to that point had it not been for this type of situation, right? I don't think Katniss really would have gotten to many points in this series without a lot of these situations being thrust upon her. But it's really interesting how it all clicks into place for her. How all of the things that Gale has said over the years start to solidify for her, despite the fact that she has believed them to a degree and that she does know the Capitol is corrupt and disgusting. She's now really seeing it. She's now really living it. And then when Peeta expresses wanting to keep his humanity intact and knowing that he's gonna die, but how does he keep his humanity? That's something that clicks into place for her, right? And this is like the moment. This to me is the moment of the book, like the most important moment of the book. So she says, "It's the Capitol I hate for doing this to all of us. Gale's voice is in my head, his ravings against the Capitol no longer pointless, no longer to be ignored. Rue's death has forced me to confront my own fury against the cruelty, the injustice they inflict upon us. But here, even more strongly than at home, I feel my impotence. There's no way to take revenge on the Capitol, is there?" Then I remember Peeta's words on the roof. "Only I keep wishing I could think of a way to show the Capitol they don't own me, that I'm more than just a piece in their game." For the first time, I understand what it means. I want to do something right here, right now, to shame them, to make them accountable, to show the Capitol that whatever they do or force us to do, there is a part of every tribute they can't own, that Rue was more than a piece in their game. A few steps into the woods grows a bank of wildflowers. Perhaps they are really weeds of some sort, but they have blossoms in beautiful shades of violet and yellow and white. I gather up an armful, come back to Rue's side, slowly one stem at a time. I decorate her body in the flowers, covering the ugly wound, wreathing her face, weaving her hair with bright colors. They'll have to show it, or even if they choose to turn the cameras elsewhere at this moment, they'll have to bring them back when they collect the bodies. And everyone will see her then, and know I did it. I step back and take a look at Rue. She could really be sleeping in that meadow after all. "Bye, Rue," I whisper. I press the 3 middle fingers of my left hand against my lips and hold them out in her direction. Then I walk away without looking back. Oh. Doesn't matter how many times I read it. That's obviously like such a pivotal moment for Katniss, and obviously people in the districts. But I think the other really pivotal moment actually happens like seconds later when she realizes that the boy who killed Rue, she doesn't know his name, Katniss ends up killing him for like trying to go after Rue. And Katniss realizes that that was her first real kill, like intentional kill, because the other kills that have happened in the arena, she's done them accidentally. And so this is her first real kill, and it's weighing pretty heavy on her. I kind of liked the quote that she brings up. It's something along the lines of like Gale saying, it's probably easy as hunting. And she says, in practice, it's as easy as hunting, sure, but the aftermath is much different. And so I liked this moment because she's really reflecting on what she's had to do in this arena. And especially after everything with Rue. My battery's about to die. Just give me a second. Okay. I thought my battery was not charged. My second battery was not charged. And I was like, man, sucks for me. Sucks for me. Because I've got a lot to say. So then another one of my favorite parts is basically we find out that there has been a change to the rules in the games, right? We know so far that only one victor can come out of the Hunger Games. But because things were getting a little boring, I guess, for the game makers, they decided that they were going to allow 2 victors to win as long as they came from the same district. And at this point, there were only 2 districts that had both people, and that was District 12, and I believe it was District 2. So they changed the rules. Katniss immediately goes to find Peeta. And I really loved this moment because, you know, the thing about the Hunger Games in general is that it's bleak, obviously, and there's not a lot of humor in them. Which, like, okay, when you say that out loud, it's like, no fucking duh, Stephanie. But at the same time, I'm gonna be so honest, I could be desolate, have a beef with a 70-year-old man who's absolutely gonna kill me, know that I'm gonna die tomorrow, and I'm still gonna be cracking jokes. I am. So, like, yeah, I like this moment because there's like a bit of humor, and Peeta's actually funny. Can we talk about like a little bit of justice for Peeta, because I don't think they did a great job. I don't think they did a great job. I don't think they did a great job casting Peeta. That's my one critique of the movie. They did not do a good job casting Peeta, in my opinion. It's my opinion. But I liked this moment because it's funny. I don't care about the romance. I'm not here for the romantic elements of it, but Peeta's pretty funny in this moment. He's also kind of like once again resigned to dying. Katniss once again is trying to save him because that's who she is, whether or not she likes to believe it, which is another thing that I just like do like about Katniss in some ways, is that she's so reluctant to believe that she's a good person. She's so reluctant to believe that she loves people purely. She really is in denial and refuses to believe the good things about herself. So I think that's very interesting. And I think in this moment and with Rue and with her sister, it's shown time and time again that she is always going to act in a noble way. And that's just who she is. Overall, the ending was sadistic. Okay, I completely forgot about the fact that the mutts that are supposed to be like dogs, right? That aren't really dogs, they're very human-like, although the movie also does this very differently. And I don't think the movie actually emphasized this, and maybe I missed it because of the fact that I didn't remember this at all in the books. But the mutts that like are trying to kill them in the very end are literally mutations of the tributes who died. So there's like Rue and Glimmer and all of those people who have died in the arena this go around. They literally mutated them into mutts that are trying to kill them. That's sadistic. Suzanne, what's going on, girl? I think we need to have a conversation because what the fuck? So like, yeah, the mutt situation happens. Katniss and Peeta end up being the last ones to make it. They're like waiting for their victory. They're like, all right, how long did it take you to get me out of this fucking arena? And it's not happening. And suddenly there's an announcement that the rules have changed once again and there can only be one victor. And Katniss is like, no, listen, we've got these berries that we found when we were foraging. They're poisonous. We're going out together. And the funny thing is like, Katniss is not doing it as a like revolutionary thing. She literally knows in her mind that Overall, The Hunger Games is a game that is for entertainment. It is a game that is meant to entertain the Capitol. That is why sadistic things happen. That is why they mess with these tributes in the arena. That's why it continues to happen. They want the views. They want the audience to be engaged in this Hunger Games. They try to say that it's this reminder of the revolt and how, you know, you can't find peace in this revolution, and they're trying to remind you of all of the horrible things that happened because District 13 tried to rise up, and that's why the Hunger Games came to be, and that those were dark days. But the reality is, it's entertainment. It's entertainment for the Capitol. And I would say that this is disgusting, but then I think back to the past and how people used to just watch public hangings and executions for fun. That was their entertainment. So this is not that far-fetched. So Katniss understands the game, right? She's always kind of understood the game. She's always understood that these games are not for what they say they are. It's literally just the sadistic game to entertain the Capitol. And so she's like, let's eat these berries because they need a victor, and they're not gonna let us both kill ourselves because the views will go down. They will be really disappointed. And she's right. She's not trying to do it to be revolutionary. She's really trying to save both of them. And I actually think that's funny because, you know, we go into Catching Fire, so we can move into that actually. So I started Catching Fire. So at the beginning of Catching Fire, Katniss comes home and Snow is at her house. And he essentially has this conversation with her about how this has sparked a revolution. And she even says, I didn't mean for that to happen. I was trying to get us both out alive. And he says, I believe you, but it doesn't matter. And that, I think, is one of the things about Snow that's just so, I don't know. I like Snow as a villain because while he can feel mustache twirly, and maybe because I've seen the movies and I really love the actor who plays Snow, maybe that's why I have the feelings that I do about him, but he doesn't feel like a mustache twirling villain to me. He feels like a villain that's very cunning and quiet and works in the shadows, and that's probably why they call him snaky, right? Because there's even a descriptor that he has snake-like eyes. And I think it's one of those like soft, quiet villains that creeps me out the most because you don't know what they're capable of. And he's very much described as being soft and quiet in some ways, and that he doesn't get loud with people, and he's not gonna smack you. You know those villains that are like bloodthirsty and they'll smack you for saying the wrong thing? He's not gonna do that. But you might feel like you got slapped by something that he says back to you or does to you. But that also plays into the weird factor of him like smelling like blood and roses. That's like the first thing Katniss says. And even when he like whispers in her ear that he knows about the kiss between her and Gale, she talks about how it smells like blood on his mouth, like he's just been sipping a little teacup of blood. I don't know, Snow's just very calculating to me, and he is a very good villain. He doesn't feel mustache twirling, but again, this could be coming from the fact that the movies do a really good job of fleshing him out, in my opinion. But I still think like the moment we meet him, it's creepy. In this meeting with Snow, we find out a couple things, right? He's basically telling her, you need to make me believe that you were in love with Peeta, and that's why you wanted to save both of your lives. Like, you were too lovesick and you couldn't live without him, and so you would rather die with him in the Hunger Games than lose him. And he tells her, like, you need to make me believe it. Because one of the things I always forget about the beginning of Catching Fire is they're going on this like tour, this victory tour, where they go to each district and like talk and give a speech about their victory. The other thing that we find out is we finally get our first mention of Seneca Crane. Now, if you've watched the movies, Seneca Crane is like a big part of the movies. We get to see so much with him. But in the book, I realized we had like no mentions of him. And we actually don't get our first mention of him until this very moment in Catching Fire. He ended up dying because of his decision to let both of them live. Because it was ultimately his decision to let them live, not President Snow. And President Snow was like, I would have let them both die. So it also made me interested in Plutarch, right? Because Plutarch's supposed to be coming into this book. Plutarch is the new game maker. I'm curious, do we see that much of him in this book? Or is it the same as Seneca Crane, where we're not going to meet him till the third book because he plays such a pivotal part in the third book? Very curious. Another little thing that I forgot was, you know, Catching Fire is a quarter quell, and we already have like a slight mention of the quarter quell. We haven't gotten to the point where it's announced that the quarter quell is happening and what's going to be happening in that quarter quell. What we did find out is that Haymitch won a quarter quell, which I did not remember. And that makes me even more excited for the new book because what do you mean? What do you mean? The quarter quells are supposed to be like more diabolical than the regular Hunger Games, and he won one. So I have stopped at 17%, which is like the beginning of the victory tour, which means that they're going to District 11, which is Rue's district, and this is a pretty pivotal moment. I'm excited to see that play out because I also don't remember what the speech actually is and what ignites the situation that unfolds in that scene. But the other thing that I don't know, I just like really appreciated in the beginning portions of this so far is like Katniss realizing that not everyone in the Capitol is like this disgusting human being, because she's surrounded by Cinna's design team, and obviously they're all from the Capitol, and she's connected really, really well with Cinna. Like they have such a special relationship, and he can kind of convince her and comfort her in ways that no one else can. But alongside that, there's Effie and Portia and just like other members of the Capitol team that are helping her to get ready for this victory tour. And she has this moment where Cinna wants Katniss's mom to come in and show them how to braid her hair. And it's the way that Katniss observes them learning from her mom and how soft they are with her mom and how they were genuinely wanting to learn and just like take in that moment. And she really softens towards them and realizes that like sometimes you are a product of what you're raised in. But I do think that's an interesting moment because it's also like you can be a product of what you're raised in, but once you start to see the layers of things fall away, what do you do with that, you know? How do you respond to those things? So we're not quite at the point, I guess, yet where they're realizing how disgusting all of this is. But, you know, we get that moment of humanity between all of them, I guess. And there's also the moments between Katniss and her mom in general, where Katniss is like really trying to soften towards her mom. There's this quote actually that like really resonated with me. Since I've been home, I've been trying hard to mend my relationship with my mother, asking her to do things for me instead of brushing aside any offer of help as I did for years out of anger. Letting her handle all the money I won, returning her hugs instead of tolerating them. My time in the arena made me realize how I need to stop punishing her for something she couldn't help, specifically the crushing depression she fell into after my father's death, because sometimes things happen to people and they're not equipped to deal with them. I really just love Katniss's growth. And I love that like her forgiveness of her mom isn't this forced thing that happened overnight. It's gonna be slow and it's a long road for her. And I just appreciate those little moments. So I'm still having such a great time in my reread. I feel like I'm just recapping things for you and like not giving the greatest updates, but like here we are. This is what we're doing.
Hello, I have rainbows on my face. All right, so I'm like, I don't know, 30% into Catching Fire. I don't really even know where I was yesterday. I've just been listening to it kind of nonstop simply because I couldn't sleep last night. And I was listening to it while I was falling asleep, and I maybe listened to 40 minutes of it, and then I woke up at 3:30 in the morning and I couldn't go back to sleep. So I just popped in my headphone and continued listening, and that's obviously why there are really no updates up to this point. So there have been a few things that stuck out to me. So right before I updated you, we were getting ready for the victory tour, which like disgusting. Everything about all of the Hunger Games and stuff, disgusting. But yeah, victory tour. What is interesting about that whole thing, and something that really sticks out to me, especially in the way that this book has progressed so far romantically, is essentially that like Katniss finds out, you know, all of this stuff with Snow where she's like, I have to make him believe that I'm in love with Peeta. And this results in them having this like fake proposal situation, right? And she comes to this realization that if he fake proposes, they have to actually get married or fake married, whatever. And this means that she has to spend the rest of her life pretending or actually being married to Peeta, despite the fact that she doesn't want to get married at all. And she says this. She makes a point of saying that like the one thing about living in District 12, the freedom that she has, is they have the right to marry whoever they want or to not get married at all. And we have seen time and time again that she doesn't really think she wants to get married because of the state of the world. It's not so much that she's not interested in marriage, although I'm gonna ride the Katniss's ace train till I die. But that being said, because I know how this ends, I can't like ride hard for that at the moment, because that's just not how the story goes. So what I find to be super interesting about this is sort of how this moment happens and then things progress a little bit differently with Gale, but also Peeta. We already know that Gale kissed Katniss and he's like, I had to give it one shot, you know what I mean? She kind of reminisces on that because Snow knows about this kiss. But then she goes on the victory tour, and during this victory tour, her and Peeta are really, you know, playing into this narrative, but they actually do comfort each other a lot. Katniss finds so much comfort in Peeta because besides Haymitch, he's quite literally the only person that understands what she's been through in the realm of the Hunger Games. But Peeta is ultimately literally the only person who knows what she has been through in their Hunger Games and the situation that they find themselves in with President Snow, even though Peeta doesn't really know about President Snow visiting her, etc. yet. But he quickly finds out after they go to District 11, which was Rue's district, and all hell breaks loose. But yeah, romantically, like, there is this thing that she has with Peeta that it doesn't necessarily have to be romance, right? He just happens to be very much in love with her, I guess. We're not in his head, so I can't, like, speak to that, but he's apparently in love with her. Like, it could have been friendship. It could have just been, like, a really great platonic friendship, but it's not. So you kind of see that she has this thing with Peeta because, like, who else is going to understand the nightmares? Who else is going to understand what she went through in those Hunger Games, right? So they have that kind of connection. But then she also has a connection with Gale that's wholly unique because he understands what it's like to lose a parent and have to step up and, like, be the parent of your family, to raise these kids that aren't yours, to, like, lose your own childhood and get thrust into adulthood, and also trying to survive in District 12. So it's like this interesting dynamic where both of these men in her life know her in a very unique way that neither of them will ever be able to understand, you know what I mean? While I don't like the love triangle aspect that's happening here, I also think there's more to it than it just being a love triangle. It's just the ways in which we know people, and I think maybe the romance narrative was pushed a little too much in that it could have been these really beautiful friendships, but, like, maybe it's also this whole thing about, like, being young and not really understanding love, but also realizing that you can, like, love people in a multitude of ways. I don't know. Maybe that's bullshit. All I know is I think the romance stuff is just interesting. It's progressing a lot differently in the book than it did in the movie. I have already watched the movie, and I will say that in the movie is very annoying. In the book, it doesn't annoy me as much because I think there's much to ponder. There's much to ponder about that, and I also think the stuff with Gale doesn't feel out of left field as it did in the movie. And now that I'm, like, reading it and experiencing it, it doesn't feel out of left field. Like, I actually understand why she plays into her impulses with Gale, but also plays into her impulses with Peeta. And I don't really know if it's, like, supposed to be this love triangle thing or this girl trying to navigate, like, what relationships are supposed to look like for her, and that this is another way in which people thrust things upon her shoulders, right? Because who's to say how she's supposed to love someone, you know? But they're trying to tell her how to love, and they're trying to tell her to be the face of this revolution, etc. So I think that's an interesting thing where, like, Katniss is genuinely just trying to survive, and people place so much on her, but, you know, she is accountable for her own actions. You know, I'm not saying that she's wholly, like, innocent in some of these situations, but, like, it's interesting. It's an interesting, like, thing to compare and contrast. So yeah, we have the victory tour. So what comes of that I think is super interesting, one, actually plays off of something that I talked about earlier, where I was talking about how Katniss was kind of softening to some of the Capitol people, especially the stylists that help her get ready, right? Anyway, they go to the big Capitol party, and Katniss is like, oh my god, there's so much food here, I want to taste everything. And they're just kind of going around tasting things, like having a good time, her and Peeta. And then she's like, man, I'm so full, I can't eat another bite. And one of the stylists, I can't remember if it's Portia or who it is, basically tells Katniss, like, oh, well, that's what these drinks are for. And it's basically drinks that make you vomit, right? And Peeta has, like, a visceral reaction to this. And I mean, so does Katniss, but Peeta has a very visceral reaction to it. And he essentially says to her, like, the moment that I feel like I like them, they do something like this. And then Katniss kind of goes into her head and is thinking about, like, all of the people that are starving in her district, how her and her family were starving, and that these people are so gluttonous, basically. And I do think that's, like, very important to the story, right? Because you have all these Capitol people that are very gluttonous, that watch these kids die and indulge on all of these things that they have that these other districts don't have, and you question, like, How can they be so kind to Katniss and Peeta and genuinely feel that they love them and adore them and want to call them friends, but at the same time allow suffering to happen? But this is something that you could ask yourself in real life, right? Like, we think about human rights issues all the time. It's very interwoven. I think that is a very clear message from that scene. And I really like the way that it was done, because that is the crux of it, right? You want to like these people because they seem nice and they seem innocent, but then they are literally partaking in your suffering. Very interesting moment. And then lastly, the thing that like really stuck out to me, I left off at the scene where Gale gets whipped, and we immediately find out that things in District 12 are changing. And one of the things that Katniss notices, even in the Hunger Games, when Rue is telling her about her experience in District 11, when she goes and visits the other districts, Katniss is seeing that maybe District 12, being the lowest of the low, is kind of forgotten, and maybe they don't have it as bad as some of these other districts in the realm of how cruel the peacekeepers are, right? So there are new peacekeepers in town, things are changing in the town, and it's not good. So the romance actually progresses because of this moment when Gale gets whipped, but this is also the moment that you see, because Katniss has brought so much attention to her district, to herself, to this revolution. Things are changing for District 12 in a really negative way. And they have a new head peacekeeper, and he is violent. He is violent. And Katniss even says, like, she doesn't recognize any of the faces of the other peacekeepers. And so now they're scared to hunt, because that's what Gale got in trouble for, is that he was going to the head peacekeeper to sell him a turkey. Because, like, hunting, they didn't really do much to them about it. The peacekeepers that were there before just kind of partook in it, you know? But, like, in theory, hunting for yourself is outlawed. It's kind of wild, yeah, when you think about like all of the restrictions that they have on themselves, the fact that they're like almost like cattle, they're stuck in this one place, it's fenced off, they can't even go beyond that fence. Yeah, things are getting bad. I actually do not remember Catching Fire that well. I thought that I did. I mean, there are things that I remember, especially because I just watched the movie, but there are things that I really remember, especially the Quarter Quell. I remember the Quarter Quell really well. Everything else I'm not really remembering, and I'm having a great time, and I'm loving this book. This was my favorite book when I first read it, and it's continuing to be a favorite. Every day I turn on this camera, and every day I ask myself, what the fuck is happening with my hair? Hello. Hello, it's me. So this is gonna be a really quick update, but I keep forgetting to mention it, and she's like on the page right now, so I felt like I needed to update. Madge. I keep forgetting this character exists in the book because she's not in the movies, and she actually is like super important. And I also thought it was important to update this because obviously Sunrise on the Reaping is coming out, Haymitch's story, and Madge's aunt is like a big part of his story. So Madge, if you don't remember, is the mayor's daughter, the mayor of District 12, because they do have mayors, which is also something that isn't really in the movie. Yeah, anyway, she is the mayor of District 12's daughter, and Katniss has said from the very beginning of the book, like, that Madge and her kind of have this unspoken friendship, which sounds weird, but it's because Katniss is not a very social person and Madge is really shy, but they always kind of end up in groups together. They're very cordial with one another, and so Katniss kind of takes this as this like quiet friendship that they end up having. But as the books go on, and especially in Catching Fire, Madge is really on her side and really does like Katniss as a person and as a friend. And when Gale actually is going through his recovery from getting whipped, Madge ends up bringing Katniss morphling, which is their version of morphine, to help his pain and his recovery. And more importantly, Madge is the person who gave Katniss the Mockingjay pin, which is like the biggest symbol throughout this series now. And so I'm currently at the part where the Quarter Quell has been announced. We know that Katniss is basically going back into the arena, and now Peeta is going back into the arena. It was between Haymitch and Peeta. Peeta ended up volunteering in place of Haymitch, and so they are getting prepared for the Quarter Quell because the Quarter Quell is supposed to be like more intense than a regular Hunger Games. And Haymitch won a Quarter Quell, which was something that was like a little bit of a revelation to me. I don't remember that at all. And we find out that Madge's aunt, which is Madge's mother's sister, ended up going and dying in that Quarter Quell, and she was the one who wore the Mockingjay pin. And so
for Madge to give that to Katniss is like such a huge thing. And so yeah, I'm just like realizing how important Madge's character is to this story, and I'm so surprised they didn't add her in some capacity to the movies. I just needed to like update about it because I keep meaning to talk about Madge, and then she pops into the story and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna update about that, and then I completely forget. Good morning. We have so much to talk about, mainly because I didn't really sleep last night. I've been having so many stress dreams, a lot's going on in my life, so sleeping hasn't been happening. I went to bed at like 10, and by that time I had finished Catching Fire, and I was like, okay, I'll start Mockingjay. I'll probably just listen to like 20 minutes of it. And that in theory did happen, but then I woke up at 3 in the morning and started listening again, and now I'm 40% into Mockingjay, so we have so much to catch up on. So I didn't update too much about the Quarter Quell because I didn't have too many thoughts about it. It is one of my favorite parts of Catching Fire because I think the game itself is very interesting, and the fact that it is a clock. But the things that actually stuck out to me within the games were just like small stuff, little things between Finnick and Katniss, how they were building this friendship. Even Peeta building a friendship with other people, but also being really weary of everyone else. And then everyone else seemingly being on the same page and slipping up and kind of saying things about how they're trying to save her or save Peeta. And Katniss and Peeta being like, what are you talking about? Because no one tells Katniss or Peeta anything. The other big thing that happens is they figure out that the Hunger Games, the arena, is a clock, and Katniss reflects on the fact that Plutarch actually gave her a hint. He gave her the hint before it was announced she was gonna be in the Quarter Quell. Katniss is like ruminating over this as to why he would give her a hint and why the watch also had a Mockingjay on it. And we quickly find out after just chaos, after Katniss shoots an arrow into the dome of the arena, which is like this force field, and a hovercraft immediately kind of comes in and gets her, but she passes out. And by the time she wakes up, there is a whole info dumping moment. Haymitch and Plutarch basically explain things to Katniss. They say there was a plan to break us out of the arena from the moment the Quell was announced. The victor tributes from 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 11 had varying degrees of knowledge about it. Plutarch Heavensbee has been, for several years, part of an undercover group aiming to overthrow the Capitol. He made sure the wire was among the weapons. Beatty was in charge of blowing a hole in the force field. The bread we received in the arena was coded for the time of the rescue. The districts where the bread originated indicated the day, the number of rolls, the hour. The hovercraft belonged to District 13. Bonnie and Twill, the women I met in the woods, were right about its existence and its defense capabilities. We are on a very roundabout journey to District 13. Meanwhile, most of the districts in Panem are in full-scale rebellion. It's an awful lot to take in, this elaborate plan in which I was a piece, just as I was meant to be a piece in the Hunger Games, used without consent, without knowledge. At least in the Hunger Games, I knew I was being played with. I hate this moment because it's one of those things where you're obviously rooting for these uprisings, right? Because you want them to overthrow the Capitol. The Capitol has been horrible to these districts and these people for years and years and years. I don't know, you want to be behind it, but then at the same time, the one thing that I keep saying throughout this video and like reading these books is the fact that these older people put the weight of the world on the 17-year-old's shoulders, but like also never told her about it. So does that make them any better than the Capitol? Like at least getting her consent it would have, you know, been a little bit different, right? And the thing is she immediately clocks that and she is angry. And I really like angry Katniss. And this is the thing about Catching Fire that's so heartbreaking, right? Is that everyone she felt kind of a closeness to that wasn't her mom and her sister, she starts to question everything about them and like why she wasn't let in on what was going on and why she's being used as this pawn and this face of this revolution, but she has no say in it. She didn't get to consent to it. And so she goes on and she says, "You didn't tell me. My voice is as ragged as Finnick's. Neither you nor Peeta were told. We couldn't risk it," says Plutarch. "I was even worried you might mention my indiscretion with the watch during the games." He pulls out the pocket watch and runs his thumb across the crystal, lighting up the Mockingjay. "Of course, when I showed you this, I was merely tipping you off about the arena. As a mentor, I thought it would be a first step toward gaining your trust. I never dreamed you'd be a tribute again." I question that, actually. So Plutarch was the game master, if you don't remember. And I have a hard time believing that he didn't know, I have a hard time believing that. But Katniss goes on to say, I still don't understand why Peeta and I weren't let in on the plan. Because once the force field blew, you'd be the first ones they tried to capture, and the less you knew, the better, says Haymitch. The first ones? Why? I say, trying to hang on the train of thought. For the same reason the rest of us agreed to die to keep you alive, says Finnick. We had to save you because you're the Mockingjay, Katniss, says Plutarch. While you live, the revolution lives. The bird, the pin, the song, the berries, the watch, the cracker, the dress that burst into flames. I am the Mockingjay. The one that survived despite the Capitol's plans, the symbol of the rebellion. Again, they're telling her, you are the Mockingjay. And she's like, what? What do you mean? And this is something that persists throughout Mockingjay in general, that I've highlighted millions of quotes of Katniss talking about how they're using her and how she's just a pawn in another game. And this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel correct. And she feels like everyone is kind of lying to her and turning their backs on her and only wanting to use her for their own gain, right? And I think that's like part of war in general. People use the excuse of war as a means to do these like egregious things to other people for the sake of like the greater good. And the 40% that I'm into Mockingjay, it's just continuously that. There are some characters that are obviously seeing what Katniss is seeing, but what I think is more heartbreaking is that the relationship between Katniss and Gale is fracturing and kind of like crumbling, because you've seen it before in the other books, but this one especially because you spend the most time with Gale in this Mockingjay book than any of the other books. And Katniss has mentioned it before. Gale always has ranted and raved about the Capitol, about the corruption of the Capitol, about needing to take down the Capitol. Like, what would happen if the Capitol were taken down? Or what would happen if we ran away and just lived in the woods, right? And Katniss has admitted that she kind of just ignored his ranting and raving, because to her it was like, yeah, well, there's nothing that we can do, and so I'm just going to live in the now and try to figure out the now. And so she thinks a lot on his words, and in moments she definitely agrees with him. And she sees it more and more as she is this pawn in not only Snow's game, but also President Coin's game. President Coin is the one in charge of District 13. And we slowly start to see that Gale and Katniss's relationship starts to crumble down, because Gale is really taking the side of President Coin and starting to become a close confidant of President Coin's. And Katniss doesn't trust this, and she also thinks that it's a slap in the face to her. And it's actually really sad, because I don't give a shit about the romance, right? I don't care about the romance aspect of it. I've said it before, it didn't really bother me in Catching Fire. There are things where like it feels a little bit forced, and I simply think that's just like a product of the times and the fact that it's YA, blah, 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 blah. But I also stand by the fact that I think Peeta and Gale play very specific roles in Katniss's life. And I am not a like Team Peeta, Team Gale type of person in this scenario, but I do think that like every strong relationship that she has is very important, because she's lost so much, as has everyone else. And so to not only see her relationship with Gale crumbling, but Peeta has been captured. So Peeta did not make it out of the Quarter Quell. They weren't able to get him, and the Capitol got him. And now the Capitol is using Peeta in order to like get the rebellion to stop and to get Katniss to stop being the face of the rebellion. And in the first like interview with Caesar Flickerman, Peeta is asking for a ceasefire, and Katniss's heart just breaks. And where I'm at in the book right now, we have the second interview that went on TV, and everyone thinks that Katniss hasn't seen it, but her and Finnick did see it, and they're pretending they haven't because they're curious if anyone will mention it to her. And it's interesting because no one does mention it to her. So Caesar asks, is there anything you'd like to tell her, meaning Katniss? There is, Peeta says. He looks directly into the camera, right into my eyes. Don't be a fool, Katniss. Think for yourself. They've turned you into a weapon that could be instrumental in the destruction of humanity. If you've got any real influence, use it to put the brakes on this thing. Use it to stop the war before it's too late. Ask yourself, do you really trust the people who you're working with? Do you really know what's going on? And if you don't, find out. And so it's funny to me, and to Katniss and to Finnick that no one is bringing this particular message up to Katniss. And she, in her Katniss way, like decides to kind of confront Gale, right? I don't believe for a second that he didn't see Peeta's propo, that I feel completely betrayed that he didn't tell me about it. We know each other too well for him not to read my mood and guess what has caused it. Katniss, he begins. Already the admission of guilt is in his tone. I grab my tray, cross to the deposit area, and slam the dishes onto the rack. By the time I'm in the hallway, he's caught up with me. Why didn't you say something? He asked, taking my arm. Why didn't I? I jerk my arm free. Why didn't you, Gale? And I did, by the way, when I asked you last night about what had been going on. I'm sorry, all right? I didn't know what to do. I wanted to tell you, but everyone was afraid that seeing Peeta's propo would make you sick. They were right, it did, but not quite as sick as you lying to me for coin. At that moment, his communicuff starts beeping. There she is. Better run. You have things to tell her. Like, ooh. For a moment, real hurt registers on his face, then cold anger replaces it. He turns on his heels and goes. Maybe I have been too spiteful, not giving him enough time to explain. Maybe everyone is just trying to protect me by lying to me. I don't care. I'm sick of people lying to me for my own good, because really it's mostly for their own good. Lie to Katniss about the rebellion so she doesn't do anything crazy. Send her into the arena without a clue so we can fish her out. Don't tell her about Peeta's propo because it might make her sick, and it's hard enough to get a decent performance out of her as it is. I do feel sick, heartsick, and too tired for a day of production. I love and hate these moments because it's like finally Katniss is seeing that she has to have her own autonomy, right? And she doesn't want to be under the thumb of people anymore. But at the same time, she is recognizing that like this revolution is potentially very necessary, but also at what cost, and at what cost to her. And she kind of goes back and forth between these ideas of like, does it even matter what's happening to me if in the end this is all for the greater good? And obviously Katniss is a character who is like very good. She's a very good character. She's a very caring character. We see this throughout the entirety of the series. And I think the other thing that's really overwhelming about it as the reader and for Katniss is that from the very beginning, like very early on when she finally decides to agree to be the Mockingjay. And so they're trying to get propos of her like talking about this revolution, talking about being the face of this revolution. And in order to do that, they have to like film her giving those speeches, and she's just not like natural at doing things like that. So this is all very interesting because I think it once again plays into her being used. Like she's just the face of this. I feel like a lot of people don't even view her as human. I don't really mean the people in the districts. Like you see time and time again that the people in districts see her as human and see her as this beacon of hope. It's not so much that she's like the face of the rebellion. She's more of a beacon of hope to them. But it seems to like all of the people who are instrumental in making this rebellion happen and putting her as the face of this rebellion don't see her in that light. And this becomes very obvious when they're like, okay, we've got to make you over and we're going to film you talking about this revolution and being the Mockingjay. And she's like, okay, you're giving me a script? Which does not work. And even Haymitch is like, there has never been a moment where Katniss has been able to work off of a script. We know this. So they do put her in the field, as it were. They go to District 8 where there's a lot of injured and wounded. And that is where you see that a lot of people see her as a beacon of hope and not necessarily just wanting to use her as this symbol, right? They do love her, they care about her. And there's a whole scene where she goes and sees these very injured and sick people. And when they realize who she is and that she's still alive, they're like asking her how she is. They're touching her face. They're crying and they're happy that she's alive and that she's here to be the Mockingjay and she's here to see them. And that's a really powerful moment, especially knowing how this book ends. I think it's really, really important. And I'm glad that Katniss so early on is seeing the difference, I guess, because that's the important part. The other important thing that happens is, you know, in the beginning of the books, the first two books, to get her ready for the Hunger Games, we have Cinna, who's her stylist, and Cinna's team who help like beautify her. And when I updated about Catching Fire, there was a scene where like they're at the party and they're the ones talking about how you can just go throw up your food. And Peeta's like, you know, there's moments where I really love them and I think of them differently than I think of people in the Capitol. And then they say things like that. And it reminds me of where we're at and what we're dealing with. And Katniss has very similar feelings. And so one day she ends up finding that her stylist crew is in District 13, but they're being held captive, like chained up, have blisters all over their arms, they're malnourished, and they stink of like urine and feces. And she's like, what the hell is going on? And the guard's like, they stole bread. And she's like, this seems a little extreme. So they end up rescuing this team to help her, and obviously the team is very traumatized. And Gale, who witnesses this whole situation, is not very sympathetic because the team is from the Capitol, and he even says like, so what, they just don't see the Hunger Games, they pretend it doesn't happen. And Katniss is like, I understand where you're coming from, but imagine being raised to believe that this is okay, which I have a lot of problems with that mentality, but I find this to be a notable and important moment for Katniss because it showcases Katniss doesn't see things in black and white, right? She doesn't think that just because somebody is a product of the Capitol that they just automatically should die, like their life is forfeit, because I think in her mind, that's the same way that the Capitol sees the districts, as expendable, as just soldiers in keeping their life grand and having all of this food and all of these luxuries. And Katniss is like, yeah, I see the issue with that, and I see that they should be seeing us as human, but at the same time, I'm not going to stoop to the level of trying to see someone as lesser or expendable the way that the Capitol has seen the districts for so long. And I just really like that moment with her. I think that's really important. I think these are all like really small moments that are super important to like Katniss as a character, or I'm reading into it, I don't know. The one other thing that I wanted to touch on that I thought was like an interesting moment was Katniss questioning what happens if they win this revolution. So Gale asks, if we win, who would be in charge of the government? Everyone, Plutarch tells him. We're going to form a republic where the people of each district and the Capitol can elect their own representatives to be their voice in a centralized government. Don't look so suspicious, it's worked before. In books, Haymitch mutters. In history books, says Plutarch, and if our ancestors could do it, then we can do it too. Frankly, our ancestors don't seem much to brag about. I mean, look at the state they left us in. With the wars and the broken planet, clearly they didn't care about what would happen to the people who came after them. But this republic idea sounds like an improvement over our current government. So I actually think that I could finish Mockingjay today, and hopefully in my next update, it's not as chaotic or all over the place. But I had a lot on my mind, okay, and I had read too much before updating. Okay, so in my previous ramblings, I was thinking about why the moment that Katniss is kind of defending her stylist team and them being in the Capitol mattered. And like, yes, it's the black and white thing that I'm talking about. But also, Gale is under this impression that people in the Capitol couldn't learn and grow and like change, and that they in fact just deserve to die. They don't deserve justice or the ability to change and like grow from that. So I think that's why that is such an important moment, as well as the like Katniss doesn't see things in black and white like that. So two things kind of have happened in the last like 10% that I've read, and one of them is just reminding me how much I love Finnick. So Finnick is a character that we meet in the Quarter Quell, and he's one of the victors from, is he from 4? I cannot remember. He's one of the victors that gets put in the Quarter Quell, and he also formed an alliance with Katniss, and he was aware of the rebellion brewing and that they were going to be getting out of the Quarter Quell, so he was trying to protect her. And they have some moments in the Quarter Quell that are really funny, and like she starts to soften towards him. But then in Mockingjay, he does end up getting out, and he's going through this really intense mental breakdown because the woman that he loves, she has been taken by the Capitol as well. And you know, Snow's whole thing is that like he's not going to kill the people that you love, because if he keeps them alive and he's torturing them, then he has something to hold over you. Which again is why I think that like partly it's the movies, but partly I feel that he's not mustache twirling. Like he's very calculated, and you know what his motivations are for the most part. But again, it's potentially because I've seen the movies a few times. But because of Finnick going through his mental breakdown and Katniss being in and out of the hospital this whole time, she gets to talk to him a bit, and also he was the one who saw the propo where Peeta was like, who do you trust, Katniss? How well do you know these people? And she confided in him a lot during that moment, and the fact that like no one was talking to her about it, especially Gale. And so Finnick and her just had this conversation about like, how do you stay sane? And he was like, Katniss, I obviously don't. Like, I'm not staying sane in the face of the person I love being tortured by Snow, and the fact that I know he's not going to kill her, because what else would he have to use against me? And he's just like, I just have coping mechanisms. And I love the way that he's portrayed. It's very sad, but I love the way that he's portrayed because he's very sensitive, but like the persona that he has had to put on for years is so opposite of who he actually is. And we get little moments where he jokes and like puts on that persona with Katniss, but otherwise he's just really soft with her. There's also another propo from Peeta, which actually spurs the conversation between Katniss and Finnick, where he warns them that there's going to be a bombing at District 13. And Snow's like, cut the cameras, dead ass. The thing about Plutarch is I thought that we would be getting to know him a little bit better in this book. I was wondering if we were going to get like backstory on him. How did he end up as a game maker? How did he end up in this rebellion, which we're not really getting so far. But the one thing that we do get from him that's very like questionable, and obviously he's a questionable figure in general, is that like they're getting bombed and he's like, right, but we got through to the Capitol. Like we hacked into the Capitol and we got your face on TV. Like, it's all a show, baby. That's how he comes off. He's a very questionable character. I don't know how much more we get from him. I know we have like another scene at the end where Katniss and him have an interaction after everything is all said and done. And I'm very, very curious about what that conversation is going to look like, because I absolutely do not remember. I do not remember. And I'm surprised that this is my first time rereading Mockingjay. I've never reread Mockingjay. I remember so much of it. Part of it is having already watched the movie, for sure. But there are things that I really remember that like aren't even in the movie. So, core memory. Realize that my backgrounds are progressively going to get messier and messier as we like continue packing. If you didn't know, we're moving. That being said, I've been cleaning today. I've been packing up small things that we're like not using, and I've been packing up some books because I mean a lot of these I've already read. So anyway, I've been listening to Mockingjay, and I'm pretty sure my last update was about Finnick, right? And him being a character that you kind of just grow attached to, and you start to see the face of him under the facade that he puts on. And we just got to the scene where he explains that President Snow selling his body to the highest paying people in the Capitol that wanted to have sex with him, and if he didn't do it, then he would kill and torture people that Finnick loved. And so obviously, because Finnick loves them like any other person, he went along with it, and he decided in that to get back at President Snow. He would essentially get secrets out of them in the bedroom, and now he's spilling all of the secrets on this like propo. And Katniss says she immediately wants to go up to him and hug him and apologize for any negative thing that she's ever thought about Finnick, because you can't really know anybody in this Capitol. You don't know what they're doing to try to survive. And she's obviously like really recognizing this at this point. So she turns to Haymitch and she asks him, is this what happened to you? And he says, well, 2 weeks after I was crowned victor, they killed everyone that I loved. So they had nothing else left to use. This is why I'm saying Snow is so calculating. And it's like, he's not the type of villain that's going to smack you across the face if you talk back to him. He's going to do something very vindictive, which is almost scarier because you never see it coming. And then the other thing that comes out about President Snow, which is such an interesting aspect of his character, is that he has poisoned any adversary that he's ever had. And the reason he uses the roses is to cover up the smell of like the festering wounds inside of his mouth from taking the poison, because he would take the poison to make himself look less suspicious. So I'm telling you, calculated. So I'm not really gonna be talking about Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes, but I did watch the movie the other day. I did not like the movie. I didn't like the movie, but I am more intrigued about the storyline because I feel like they cut the movie in a way where if you have not read the book, it didn't fully make sense. So to me, I felt a little bit lost throughout it. But something that stuck out to me was in Mockingjay, we've already passed this moment, they're in District 12. This happens right before Finnick like goes on TV and tells them all of Snow's secrets. Katniss sings this song. I jokingly sing this song to Jared all the time, by the way, because I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know why. It's the are you coming to the tree? Okay, but in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, there is this character in there, like she's one of the main characters. She's like supposed to be the crux of why Snow is the way that he is. And I'm not gonna get into any of the spoilers for that because again, I don't feel like I fully understood the story that well. Like I got the gist of it. But anyway, she sings. She is a singer and her people are from this traveling group of musicians, but they got stuck in District 12 when like the uprising happened and the dark days happened, which is when 13 got bombed and decimated. So they got stuck in District 12. And so she sings in District 12 and she has all these songs and she writes songs, and she in the book and the movie is the tribute for District 12. So she's singing all the time, right? But we see this scene where she's singing the song, are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they said he murdered 3. So this is actually like a big song in Mockingjay, and like in the movie they even made it like a really big deal. And so when I heard it in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I was like, did she write this song? And then I think it was confirmed. Y'all, I think it was confirmed because Katniss says, I have not sung the hanging tree out loud for 10 years because it's forbidden. It's forbidden. But I remember every word. I begin softly, sweetly, as my father did. It's forbidden. Like to make a note that when they sing it in the movie, to me, it sounds like, are you going to the tree? I feel like my updates have gotten more and more incoherent, but we're here for a good time, not a coherent time. Okay, so I finished Mockingjay like 2 or 3 days ago, and I just have not had the time to come talk to you about it because we finally found a place. Finally found a place. It's just been a whirlwind, so I have not had time to read. I have not had time to update, edit. That's why this video is going out late. I was really hoping to have it out on Tuesday when Sunrise and the Reaping was coming out. But that's just not happening, and that's okay. That's okay. However, I finished Mockingjay and I'm gonna try to give you updates to the best of my abilities, but it's been a few days. Life has been wild, so I don't know how much I'm going to remember to cover because I didn't take notes this time. Every other time I took notes and this time I didn't, but I do know that one of the things that I really wanted to talk about, I like had a plan to update specifically about this one particular thing before I even finished Mockingjay, and it was about Peeta becoming hijacked basically. So one of the things about the Hunger Games that like, Suzanne, are you okay? You're a little bit sadistic. There are a lot of mutts / mutations. And I kind of talked about this when we were talking about Hunger Games, because the dog-like creatures that were put in the arena in the first Hunger Games were mutations of the tributes that had passed away in the arena already. And then we have things like mockingjays, which are mutations of mockingbirds and jabberjays. And jabberjays were supposed to be used during the wartime when District 13 was rebelling. They used jabberjays in that war to transmit messages. So they were able to literally like almost record those messages and repeat them verbatim to the enemy, right? That's how they won the war. That's how they figured out where District 13 was and all of their plans. And again, in book 1, we know about trackerjackers, which are almost like wasp-like creatures, but they literally target in on one person or a group of individuals, and they will not stop tracking you until you are dead. So we know that they have this technology to create these mutations, and so they finally break into the Capitol and they get Peeta and the other victors back. And what they have found out is that Peeta has been hijacked, like his brain has been hijacked. They have tortured him and used trackerjacker venom to like alter his memories of Katniss so that he'll just kill Katniss. So they were like curious why it was so easy to get Peeta and the other victories out of the Capitol. They thought it would be a lot harder. Well, it's because Peeta immediately sees Katniss and tries to kill her. And President Snow's just sitting in his chair like, ha 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 ha, I did not have to get my hands dirty. That's a really sad moment. That's a really sad moment for Katniss. It's a really sad moment for Peeta as well. And this is when you start to realize that Katniss and Peeta kind of have been through similar experiences in the realm of like losing their autonomy and losing their consent to things. So they spend a lot of time working towards getting Peeta's memories corrected. And they do this thing. Finnick does it with Annie, which is like the love of his life. She also has some mental health issues where she needs to be reminded of what's real and what's not real. And Finnick taught Katniss about this, and Katniss is using it with Peeta, where they basically ask specific questions and then follow it up with real or not real. And then Katniss or whoever has to answer that it's real or why it's not real. And I really love those moments because they use them at like the most harrowing times, 30% of this book, we see Peeta really fighting against the memories that have been hijacked and replaced with hating Katniss. And there's even moments when basically they decide they're going to storm the Capitol and try to get to President Snow and assassinate him. Katniss has her own like mission to break away from the group and assassinate President Snow without anyone around because she doesn't want anyone to die. She doesn't want any more casualties in this war. But in those moments when they're like getting through the Capitol, you come to realize that they have set up the Capitol as another Hunger Games. And so it's interesting because the question was like, how could Suzanne Collins do 3 Hunger Games like books? You know, the last one has to divert. No, it turns into another Hunger Games. Snow puts traps and stuff everywhere. It's another Hunger Games. And even Katniss says at one point, let the Hunger Games begin. So through that mission, there are moments when Peeta actually tries to kill Katniss, or they have to get Peeta to like stop being so aggressive towards Katniss. But there are other moments where he starts to remember things that are important, that like prove to him certain memories cannot be real if this other memory exists and is real. And one of those memories is actually the bread scene, which is a very important and pivotal moment for Katniss and Peeta's relationship. Again, I know this turns romantic, and I don't feel like it necessarily needed to be romantic, but the one thing that started pissing me off in this book, and now I'm realizing why like I had such issues in general with Mockingjay, is because of Gale. And in these moments, again, of them trying to storm the Capitol, Gale is in on the expedition, and so is Finnick. And like there is a moment when Katniss and Peeta like kind of have a little bit of a breakthrough, and then Peeta goes away. I think he goes off to sleep. And Gale says the statement of like, if I thought I had a chance before, I know that I never have a chance with you, type of thing. And this pissed me off for 2 reasons, because like, why is it about who's getting a chance? Like maybe she's just trying to save this person because she knows what it's like to be used as a pawn, and this game that everyone's playing, but also why does it even need to be about the romantic stuff right now? Why is it about you, Gale? Why is this about you? I did update before about how their relationship was like slightly crumbling because of him getting closer to Coin. Well, there's also scenes with Gale where he is clearly stating that he does not care about the lives of the Capitol people. And we know that he's been tinkering around with explosives and he's been working with Beatty and they're creating new war tactics with bombs and like explosives and stuff like that. And there have been several scenes so far where it's been shown that Gale just like, he is so angry that he cannot see that the Capitol people are also human and that the real enemy here is Snow and like the other game makers. But it's not all these civilians and children that are the problem and they don't all need to die. But like Gale cannot see that. He cannot see that whatsoever. And Katniss is starting to like really push back with him and they get into moments about that. But the biggest thing that ends up happening, he creates this plan with Snow that ends up getting Prim, Katniss's sister, killed alongside thousands of innocent children. And Katniss witnesses it happen. She also gets hurt by the explosion. And the thing that sucks is like their final interaction was so brief. It was just like almost a dismissal of all things. Gale just like did not apologize. They didn't talk through anything. It's just like a dismissal of everything that they've ever had. That was one of the things about this book that like I was very disappointed in. I guess the other thing I was really disappointed in is Plutarch and like how that wraps up. It's also another like nothing is acknowledged, nothing comes to a resolution with that. But the more that I think about this ending in general and the more that I want to be like irritated by certain things not wrapping up in specific ways, I actually find myself not being able to be mad at the way things wrapped up simply because I think it's more realistic than a happily ever after, right? They are in the aftermath of war. They are so traumatized. They have so much PTSD. I can't imagine a happily ever after for these people. And as sad as that is, I think that's just kind of the reality. And I also think it's very realistic that Katniss in the end is dismissed and pushed off back into District 12 as if like she wasn't a face of a revolution, as if she didn't sacrifice so much for this revolution. I actually think it really fits the books, and as an adult I think I see that more than ever. The other thing that happens is Finnick ends up dying in his pursuit to save Katniss, and that was really sad to me because I didn't realize how much Finnick grew on me in the end of Catching Fire and the beginning half of Mockingjay. The only sweet thing to come of that is Annie, Finnick's love, his wife, she was pregnant and she does end up having his baby. And so that's a really sweet moment. We do get to hear about that a little bit in the end. And I'm glad that Annie has that piece of Finnick with her. But that was a really devastating loss. And I would love to have a book about Finnick's story, but I also don't know if I could handle everything that he went through. Like, I think that would be a rough one. I think that would be a really rough read. And then lastly, President Coin. So it's funny, this whole book, something has been rubbing Katniss the wrong way about President Coin. And she couldn't quite put her finger on it, but she definitely didn't like President Coin. And President Coin knew that. And so there are revelations, slowly but surely about like President Coin not liking Katniss, that President Coin actually wanted Peeta to be the face of the revolution, but they were only able to get Katniss out. She didn't really want Katniss in this position because she knew that when it came to selecting a new leader after they killed President Snow, that Katniss would not lean towards President Coin or it would be a really hard sell for her. Obviously, one of the solidifying moments that Coin is a bad guy is the explosion, but they made the explosion look like it was from the Capitol. And it's not until Katniss and President Snow have one last scene together after the explosion and she's recovering in the president's mansion. She ends up wandering to the greenhouse where all of his roses are grown. Little does she know that President Snow is actually being held captive there. So she goes in and they have a conversation. It's pretty brief, but they do have a conversation. And that conversation, I think, really solidifies things for Katniss. I think the beginning portion of it was when Peeta is saying like, can you trust these people? And then President Snow, the one person who would know and be able to clock someone else being as corrupt as he is telling Katniss like, those explosions were not from the Capitol. Those were not from us. I would have never done that. I don't waste innocent lives. And Katniss is like, wow, no, that's so real. That's so real. And she sees that President Snow has nothing to lose. He's a dying man. He's poisoned himself to the brink of death. But what puts the last nail in Coin's coffin for Katniss is when they have like this roundtable meeting where they're talking about who's going to be the new leader and what are they going to do moving forward with the Capital people. How are they going to prevent X, Y, and Z from happening again? And President Coin suggests having a Hunger Games for the Capital people so that they see what they have put us through for years and years and years. And Katniss is like, bitch, what? Peeta and Annie are immediately like, absolutely not. What are you saying? Like, we just fought a whole revolution, lost so many people, and innocent children died because of this. And you're wanting to put a whole group of people through it again just to get your revenge? Like, what? Symbolic. What do you mean? You're just doing the same thing. It's not symbolic. And Katniss, being who she is, the clever, cunning woman that she is, she goes, yeah, let's do it. Sure. Why not? And Haymitch is like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm gonna agree with the Mockingjay on this one. And I think in that moment, it was to make Coin feel comfortable with Katniss, to make her feel like Katniss is not against her or would do anything to disrupt her being president. So then the execution of Snow comes and Katniss has her arrow pointed at Snow, and then she lifts it up and kills Coin because she knows that Coin could be as bad, if not worse, than President Snow. And President Snow is cracking up, choking on his blood. Crazy scene. What a wild time. I love that scene because it's depicted so well in the movies too. Like, Katniss's rage is just so prevalent on her face and you can just see the wheels turning. Love that scene. Basically, the end of the book, she gets carted back to District 12, like I said, and her and Peeta end up together. Like, it takes years and they end up having children and stuff together, which I know people hate that because Katniss had talked about having a choice of not getting married and, you know, not wanting to have kids. But I think why that happens, and it's not that I agree with it. I mean, I still think that Katniss should have been asexual and that these men in her life should have just been her friends. But I think that if this is the ending that we get, the reason it makes sense to me, and the reason that I think it's supposed to depict something like positive, like hopeful, I guess, is because through this reread, what I noticed Katniss saying, and maybe this isn't true. I mean, I still, again, asexual, yes. But I do feel that Katniss's desire to not have kids and to not get married was a product of not wanting to put children through what she went through, not wanting to put them through the poverty and the Hunger Games and the stress of the Capitol. And so I think her having kids and getting married is supposed to be like this hopeful thing that now things are peaceful enough that she can have kids comfortably. But again, I didn't necessarily want that as her ending, but I also am like, would I have rather her just been alone rotting in District 12? I don't know. Like, what is the lesser of two evils here? So I think ultimately this ending didn't bother me as much as it did before because I can kind of see it in a different light, but I still wish we would have gotten a little more insight in Katniss's thought process on like having the kids and getting married to Peeta. Like, is it something that made her happy? Are these the things that made her happy? Is this the vision of hope for her? I don't know. But listen, I had a great time rereading it. I am now in the middle of Sunrise on the Reaping. I'm having a good time. I will have a vlog out about that hopefully shortly after this one. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed all of my incoherent rambling. I'm so sorry this is so long and that I had so much to talk about. And I do hope that some of this made sense. I feel like in my brain, I knew what I was talking about, but is that gonna translate on camera? I don't really know. Either way, I'm not gonna waste any more of your time. I hope that you had a good time. If you want to leave a comment down below, leave a bird emoji, and I will talk to you next time. Bye, friends. Ooh.